Good morning, Barry Bryson here. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We're continuing our study of First Peter, which is a book written to Christians about to be persecuted by a Christian who's in the midst of persecution. Peter has in chapters 2 and 3 talked about our relationships, and then at the end of chapter 13, he really has gotten into the nitty-gritty about what we do when we're hauled in, arrested, accused, and interrogated. And throughout, he's talked about the example of Jesus, because these things all happened to Jesus. He suffered unjustly, and he did. He bore, Isaiah 53, he endured it, and thereby he achieved our salvation. And so he is throughout this book saying to us, when this happens to us and we suffer unjustly, that's a sacred thing, a holy thing, because we fellowship with Jesus in the moment, because it is the path of discipleship. That's the path Jesus walked, and we will walk it too. Also, because in the same way Jesus sacrificial act, his sacrifice of self, achieved our salvation, as we yield as sacrifices as well, then we are going to lead others to Christ. And he begins and ends chapter 4 with that thought, as he's repeated it multiple times already. Chapter 4 is, okay, we are living in the end game. Just get that through your head. And this is the way things are going to be. And we really are. I mean, everything that happens after the cross and after the gospel being spread in the book of Acts is now in the final phase before God comes again. You may think to yourself, well, that's been 2,000 years almost. Yes. And Peter will address that same question that they themselves asked in 2 Peter, which we'll talk about when we get there. But chapter 4 is you're living during the end game. This is the final phase of God's plan right now. And therefore, this is the way things are going to be, and this is the way you ought to be. So we're going to look at verses 1 through 6 today. Therefore, since Christ has suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves with the same purpose, because he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, so as to live the rest of the time in the flesh, no longer for the lusts of men, but for the will of God. For the time is already past. Before the time already past is sufficient for you to have carried out the desire of the Gentiles, having pursued a course of sensuality, lust, drunkenness, casuals, drinking, parties, and abominable idolatries. And in all this they're surprised that you do not run with them into the same excesses of dissipation, and they malign you. But they shall give an account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. For the gospel has for this purpose been preached even to those who are dead, as though they be judged in the flesh, as men they may live in the spirit according to the will of God. We have this preaching to people who are dead, which we talked about last time, but he's turning it on its head this time. So Christ suffered in the flesh. So just get it into your head you're going to too. I mean, this is what we signed up for as disciples. I mean, if this is the path we've chosen to walk, this is going to be a feature of that path. What else would we think? And he says, and this is the thing, when you suffer in this way, it will focus you. Things that you thought were entertaining, pleasurable, diverting before, sinful things, persecution has a way of purging those right out of your system. This is a man who knows what he's talking about. I mean, just from what we know in the book of Acts, we know the number of times he was beaten, the number of times he was in prison, the times that he escaped death. We know all those times. He knows what he's talking about. So another one of the blessings of the time you're about to go through, it's going to focus you. It's going to purge certain things out of your system. In fact, you're not those people anyway. You've had plenty of time in your past to be those people, and you're not those people now. And the Gentiles, the people who know you in your life, it really surprises them that you're not that way anymore. In fact, it upsets them that you're not that way anymore. And they ridicule you, for the way that you are and for not joining them in their sinful ways. But they're going to be judged, and you are too. And the people in the faith that have received the gospel that have already died, they're good. They're good with God. They live in the Spirit according to the will of God. They have not passed away. Paul will say in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, they're asleep, and they're okay. You don't have to worry about those who have already died. Paul says this, Peter says this. They're going to live through the Spirit. Okay, we'll pick up with verse 7. The end of all things is at hand next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.